All right, so you ready to jump into 1984?
Big Brother's watching.
He is, isn't he? We thought we'd do a deep dive into, well, one of the most famous dystopian novels ever, really.
George Orwell, 1984.
That's the one. And to do that, we watched a bunch of YouTube reviews. Got a nice little mix of opinions and analyses.
Yeah, we did. We checked out Better Than Food, Kitty G books.
Oh, and read by Fred, don't forget him.
Right, of course. Each brought something different to the table.
Definitely. But before we get into all that, I think we should give our listeners a little background, just in case.
Good idea. So 1984. Published back in 1949, Orwell was looking ahead.
Way ahead to a world that, well, frankly, seems a little too close for comfort these days. It does, doesn't it? Oceania, under the iron fist of Big Brother, surveillance everywhere.
Telescreens, can you imagine? Always watching, always listening.
Yeah, and the thought police. Don't even think about stepping out of line.
It's wild, right? I mean, some of this stuff felt like it was ripped straight from today's headlines. All this talk about data collection, facial recognition. It's spooky how relevant Orwell still is. But that's what makes this book so powerful. It makes you think.
Makes you think, makes you question. Like, how much of our freedom are we willing to give up in the name of security?
That's the big question, isn't it? One of the reviewers, Better Than Food, I think it was, did a brilliant breakdown of this concept called doublethink.
Doublethink, yeah. It's like believing two completely opposite things at the same time. My brain just, like, short-circuited when I heard that.
Right. How is that even possible? Well, according to Orwell, it's all about control. Control the information, control the narrative, and you can make people believe anything.
It's almost like brainwashing, right?
Yeah, kind of. And we see this happening all around us. Think about the news, social media. We're constantly bombarded with information, often with an agenda.
Like, who do you trust? What do you believe?
Exactly. And that's where Winston Smith comes in, our main man in 1984.
Yeah, Winston, he's the guy who starts to see through the cracks, the guy who dares to question.
He works at the Ministry of Truth, which is like the ultimate irony.
Oh, tell me about it. He rewrites history, literally changes the past to fit the party's agenda.
Read by Fred did a fantastic deep dive into this whole Ministry of Truth thing.
Totally. And it made me think, like, how much of what we believe is actually true? How much has been manipulated, distorted?
It's a scary thought, but Winston, he's not buying it. He starts to rebel in his own way.
And then there's Julia, right? She's a bit of a firecracker.
Yeah, she is. She and Winston, they find solace in each other, a little bit of humanity in this cold, heartless world.
Their relationship is like this tiny spark of rebellion, this defiance against the party's control.
And it's dangerous. You don't mess with Big Brother. He doesn't like competition.
He certainly doesn't. So we've got Winston questioning everything, rebelling in secret. We've got Julia, this breath of fresh air, a symbol of defiance, and looming over them all, the ever-present, ever-watching Big Brother.
It's a recipe for disaster, isn't it?
It kind of is. And that's where we'll pick up next time. But before we do, we want to hear from you. What are your initial thoughts on 1984? What are you finding the most intriguing, the most disturbing? Okay, so we left off talking about Winston and Julia and their kind of forbidden romance in the middle of this crazy totalitarian state.
Yeah, it's almost like their relationship is this act of defiance, you know?
Totally.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it makes you wonder, how much can a regime actually control? I mean, can they really control love?
Well, that's the thing that 1984 really digs into that. It's like they try to control every single aspect of your life, even down to your most private thoughts and feelings.
Which is just, I don't know, it's chilling. Like, one of the things that Kitty G books mentioned was how the party basically reduces sex to just a duty.
Oh, yeah. No pleasure, no intimacy, just procreation for the sake of the state.
Exactly. And it made me think about Winston's job at the Ministry of Truth and how messed up that whole situation is. I mean, he literally rewrites history.
It's like gaslighting on a massive scale.
Right.
Read by Fred really went into this, and it's just mind-blowing.
Totally. It's like you're constantly being told to believe something that you know isn't true.
And that can really mess with your head. I mean, how do you even know what's real anymore?
Right. It's like that quote, who controls the past controls the future. Who controls the present controls the past.
That's the one. And I think that's what Orwell was getting at. It's about power and how those in power can manipulate the truth to maintain control.
It's a bit scary how relevant that feels today, with all the talk about fake news and misinformation.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's everywhere. We have to be so careful about what we believe.
For sure. But going back to Winston, I mean, he's clearly starting to see through the party's lies. But is there any hope for him? Can he actually rebel against this all-powerful state?
It's a good question. I mean, he knows the risks, but he's driven by this need for truth, for freedom. And then there's Julia, who also wants to break free.
So their love, their rebellion, it's all tied up together. It's almost like a little flame of hope in this otherwise dark and oppressive world.
It is, but it comes at a cost. Remember, Big Brother is always watching, and the party doesn't tolerate dissent.
Yeah, those descriptions of the Ministry of Love and the torture that Winston goes through, it's pretty intense.
Oh, it's brutal. And Room 101, don't even get me started on Room 101.
I know, right? Read by Fred was talking about how they basically torture you with your worst fear.
It's like the ultimate breaking point. It makes you question what you're willing to endure for your beliefs, you know.
Totally. And it makes you wonder, can the human spirit really be completely crushed?
It's a tough question. But before we get into the ending and what it all means, I want to hear from you. What's been the most impactful part of 1984 for you so far? What's resonating with you the most?
That's a really good question. And it's something that's been on my mind too, you know, with how everything ends in 1984.
It's tough, isn't it? I mean, you spend the whole book rooting for Winston, hoping he'll somehow overcome the system.
Right. And then bam, he just gives in, embraces Big Brother. It's like all that struggle for nothing.
Kitty G. Books was pretty heartbroken, I think.
Oh, yeah. Who wouldn't be? I mean, talk about a downer ending.
But, you know, I think Orwell was going for something more than just a depressing ending.
Do you think so? I mean, it's pretty darn depressing.
Oh, it is. But remember, he was writing this as a warning, not necessarily a prediction.
Right. Like, wake up, people. This could happen.
Exactly. And that's why the ending is so powerful, so disturbing. It shows us what can happen when we let our guard down, when we become complacent.
Like WTI said, it's not really about the year 1984. It's about the potential for tyranny that exists in any society.
Exactly. And that potential is always there, lurking beneath the surface. It's up to us to be vigilant, to recognize the signs of encroaching control.
So you're saying even though Winston loses, his fight wasn't entirely in vain?
I think so. Read by Fred made a good point about how Winston's rebellion, even though it failed, might have planted seeds of doubt in others.
So like a ripple effect.
Yeah, maybe. It's like even in the darkest of times, a single spark of defiance can have an impact.
Okay, that makes me feel a little bit better about the ending.
Yeah.
But still, I can't help but wonder, what's the point of resisting if you're just going to get crushed in the end?
I think Better Than Food had a good answer for that. It's about staying true to yourself, to your values. Even if you can't change the system, you can choose not to let it change you.
It's about maintaining your own inner freedom, even when the world around you is closing in.
Exactly. And that's something the party can't control no matter how hard they try.
That's where the proles come in, right?
Yeah.
Kitty G. Books talked about how they represent this kind of unbreakable spirit.
Yes, they're the ones who haven't been completely brainwashed by the party. They still have their songs, their stories, their humanity.
So maybe there's hope after all. Maybe the human spirit is stronger than even Big Brother.
Maybe. I think that's the question Orwell leaves us with. It's not a happy ending, but it's not entirely hopeless either.
It's a call to action, a reminder that we have to fight for our freedom, for our humanity, every single day.
And that fight starts with awareness, with critical thinking, with questioning everything, just like Winston did.
So that's 1984, folks. A chilling vision of the future that feels all too relevant today. It's a book that stays with you long after you finish reading it, and it's definitely sparked some interesting conversations here on The Deep Dive.
Definitely. Thanks for joining us as we explored the world of Oceania, the dangers of totalitarianism, and the enduring power of the human spirit.
We hope this deep dive has given you a lot to think about and maybe even inspired you to take a closer look at the world around you.
Because the future is never set in stone. It's up to us to shape it, to ensure that 1984 remains a cautionary tale, not a blueprint.
Thanks for listening, and until next time, keep questioning, keep thinking, and keep the flame of freedom burning bright.